A supposed Chinese curse, dressed as a blessing, goes as follows. May you live in interesting times. Barely buried within this pleasantry is menacing irony. That which is interesting may very well be unpleasant, unsafe, deadly. Apocryphal or not, it calls to mind the Cultural Revolution in China, a decade of purges, struggle sessions, and other various unfreedoms that led to an unknown number of deaths. We live in strange times. For me, a few events and conversations over the past few weeks have reinforced this reality, and this video is going to indulge in exploring some wild tangents. So, let's start this journey with a question posed at the end of the film Burn After Reading.
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either. I guess we learned not to do it again.
Yes, sir.
I'm fucked if I know what we did.
Yes, sir. It's hard to say.
For the film, this perplexed reflection neatly ties up a bunch of absurd events that collided into a few moments of violence. Surviving characters have story closure, and the file is closed, symbolically and literally ending the movie. Real life does not always have such clean breakpoints, but eventually chapters do begin and end. There is but one final destination that will close every life story, one way or another. Or is there?
It's complicated. Hey, it's complicated,
It
right?
is.
It's complicated.
A story that fails to reach a satisfying resolution may endure, and this is compounded by the shroud of unconvincing information. Questions about the Kennedy assassination have lingered for decades. The suspicious mystery of Jeffrey Epstein, covered in my second Eyes Wide Shut video, is probably not going to vanish anytime soon. In some ways, the world's churn of compounding events can struggle against narrative entropy. What does that mean? It means that whatever the societal forces and complexity of relationships, some chaotic events produce increasingly inevitable outcomes. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So, what's ahead? What world is being established, and at what cost? If Trump were to go to jail, would half of Americans admit defeat to a game they believe is being played unfairly? Will we even understand what has happened when we reach some new outcome?
I guess we learned not to do it again.
Yes, sir.
I'm fucked if I know what we did.
Yes, sir. It's hard to say.
Some believe that Donald Trump has not concluded his narrative arc. It does certainly seem like the deep state empire is striking back, which in Star Wars terms puts us squarely in a middle chapter. Okay, references to the deep state may sound conspiratorial, so let me recap some recent events. For the first time in American history, an ex-president, and indeed the leading opposition candidate for the next United States presidential election, was forced to submit to a mugshot, facing jail time in the state of Georgia. Concurrently, there are state cases proceeding in New York and Florida, as well as a federal case in Washington, D.C. These cover a range of issues, from conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding to violation of the Espionage Act for retaining classified documents. And this is leaving out the New York civil suit, wherein Trump had to pay $5 million for a over 30-year-old claim of impropriety, let's call it, under special legal circumstances that were legislatively only made available for a short window.
We're just going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Right.
This sounds like the stuff of a banana republic, but whatever your politics, this is currently happening.
These are the facts of the case, and they are undisputed.
Perhaps a moment is needed to address why is a culture channel covering this subject? While I have my own views, some obvious, some perhaps not, I cover this now because the visual image, this mugshot, is a cultural artifact that is going to endure. We live in an age of abundant visual media, and even those who do not at all follow politics will see it on t-shirts, mugs, posters, transcending the limits of Twitter and cable news. Pretending it does not exist is to ignore an 800-pound cultural gorilla in the room. I can see this image becoming a cultural Rorschach test. Will you see evidence of an outcome vindicating years of accusation?
But he's both stupid and crazy, and he's a criminal. You know, he's not...
Or will you see wrongful persecution at the hands of entrenched interests?
What the mugshot does, especially this particular mugshot, is it gives Trump the appearance of somebody who is bravely standing up to forces that are going after him.
It has been said by others that the process is the punishment. It certainly seems like all the legal spaghetti is being flung to the wall, and we are seeing what sticks. Well, Mr. Default, you might say, no one is above the law. No special treatment, right? Okay, that sounds pretty good as a proposition, but how sure are we that this is how things work? You might extend a bit further. Why do you think that this case is righteous, but not comparable ones? Are there truly no comparable cases? Perhaps there are, if you choose to look for them. I read a book recently called 3 Felonies a Day about how the American justice system can target an ordinary citizen. Back in the Soviet Union, NKVD chief Lavrentiy Beria was quoted to say, "Show me the man, I'll show you the crime," meaning anyone who falls under the state's Sauron-like gaze will soon be found guilty. And yet, we cannot do without laws, can we? Consider this point made in the play A Man for All Seasons.
And Moore says to this man, you'd break the law to punish the devil, wouldn't you? And the prosecutor, the witch hunter, says, break it? He said, I'd cut down every law in England if I could do that, if I could capture him. And Moore says, yes, you would, wouldn't you? And then when you'd corner the devil and the devil turned round to meet you, where would you run for protection? All the laws of England having been cut down and flattened, who would protect you then?
I am not going to be changing any minds here, but I do hope you will consider epistemology, the philosophical branch that covers how we know what we know. This question can rapidly veer into unproductive territory, like solipsism.
What is real? How do you define real?
But how much do we rely on sources like Google, social media, or news channels? How well are they curating an accurate understanding of the world?
How sure am I of my own views? Don't take refuge in the false security of consensus and the feeling that whatever you think, you're bound to be okay because you're in the safely moral majority.
Then add to this stew that it is much easier to fool someone than to convince them they have been fooled, with the side salad of overconfidence, something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias that John Cleese likes to talk about.
That if you're absolutely no good at something at all, then you lack exactly the skills that you need to know that you're absolutely no good at it.
Oh, my dear John, surely a man so funny and sharp would recognize himself as no less fallible. Define your opponents as wrong, and you'll never notice when they make a correct point. What was it that Hitchens said?
Don't take refuge in the false security of consensus.
A little bit of learning may in fact create such overconfidence that there could be scenarios where having a little bit of knowledge is worse than having none. But everyone must start somewhere, and surely one learns one step at a time. So, what? Rely on institutions that know what they're doing? What about institutional bias, where dogmas and established practices may shun reasonable critiques, serving their own interests, and perhaps those are not actually good? Think of the Milgram experiments.
Okay. Jesus, what a clusterfuck. So that's it then. No one else really knows anything.
This too shall pass, and we will not always live under the shadow of unknowable ignorance.
Madness and stupidity.
And if we are very lucky, maybe one day we will look back and ask,
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either.
My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and